Anytime. Keep it muted. Yeah, I'll keep it muted.
Oops. God damn.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are the Owatonna School Board. This is Monday. It's June 22nd at 5:30. I'll call the meeting to order and ask Eric to take the attendance.
Try this again. Nikki.
Oh, Nikki's not going to be able to.
All right. Jolene.
Aye. Did you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes. Mark.
I'm here.
Tim.
Here.
I'm not hearing anything. Kim, could you repeat it for me?
I'm here.
Thank you. And then we got Christina,
I'm here.
Lori,
Here.
I myself am here, and our new student rep, Daniela. Not yet? Okay. So we are missing Nikki this evening.
Thanks, Eric. If all of you could rise and join me in the pledge as you're able, that would be great. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will start our evening with approving the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Did Sarah? Christina, did you have the second?
Lori did.
Lori did. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor with an aye? Aye. Oh, no.
Roll
Gee,
call.
Eric, it's a roll call vote.
Jolene,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
I myself is an aye, 6-0.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. After a somewhat rugged start, I'm happy to turn things over to Mr. Elstad for our mission moment.
Thank you very much, Board Chair Sebring and members of the board. Tonight for our mission moment, what I wanted to lay out for you, and I'm just going to hit quickly, I'm hoping everyone can see that. I just wanted to lay out for you, we've tried to kind of alter between students and staff. And in this particular instance, this really calls on both students and staff together. And this was an interesting way for us to end the school year, but our amazing staff and students continue to step forward in the ways that really help us identify that whole notion of 21st century learning, which is one of our commitments. Within that, there was a group, including Val Seith and Katie Demmer, Katie Seifert, and Lori Husengay, our second grade team at McKinley, that were looking for a way to really focus on the second grade standards as we finished off the school year, and also looking at a unit particularly on teaching students nonfiction text features. And so within that, our second grade students at McKinley, along with the help from their fabulous educators, decided to start to write stories about animals. And within those stories, and I'll just share with you the next slide. So the nonfiction digital animal book was written by our second grade students. And again, the amazing part here is that this actually got picked up by Highlights Magazine, which is a internationally known magazine, and it has been around for, I believe, over 100 years. And they picked up on this particular way of really allowing students to express themselves in a digital way, but also allowing just some real creativity with the way they did their stories. And it caught the attention of, I'm going to just toggle back here real quick. It caught the attention of a woman named, and I'm going to short about that, Christine French Cully, who happens to be the chief editor of Highlights Magazine. And she sent a video that I would be happy to share with the board. It's Got a few, it's probably about 5 minutes long, so I'll spare that tonight. But I want to share with you how proud I am of our second grade students and our staff at McKinley that really stepped forward in a light of not having the kind of regular way of presenting that content and allowing students to really become creative to a point where it catches the eye of an editor of one of the greatest education magazines in the world. And so Christine French-Cully sent this video off to the team and just said, what an amazing effort coming from Owatonna, Minnesota. Within the book, they have 80 projects completed around these digital animal stories. And again, it's through distance learning. They created this magazine all on their own. And what a great way for us, and a great story about the creativity that our students and staff engaged in during a time of distance learning. And so tonight, our mission moment really focuses on these students and staff really inspiring excellence and taking a circumstance that sort of took them away from their normal, quote unquote, way of doing things and really put them in a spot where they were recognized nationally for that sort of effort. So kudos to the staff, kudos to our students that continue to find really creative 21st century skills to express themselves in their learning. So that's it for our mission moment tonight.
Neat story. That's very thoughtful. Thanks, Mr. Elstead, for that. We're going to move on to item 5, which is public forum. Sarah informs us that there were no public entries for the public forum tonight, so we'll move on to reports. Item number 6. Once again, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Elstead, Amanda, for the levy referendum options.
Thank you again. I'm going to share our presentation here, so bear with me momentarily, and I will pull up the presentation. If I can toggle to it. All right, sparing you all the awkward silence of getting that started, I think we're ready to go. Back on May 20th, myself, along with our cabinet members at our work session, presented to you, along with a budget report from Amanda Heilman, as to what our current financial outlook was for the Owatonna Public Schools now and moving into the future. What I believe we shared with you is that we are at that time, we're in the process of exploring many possible options as to how we wanted to present this information. So tonight, what we are doing kind of in a co-presentation style is really presenting to you what our referendum recommendation is for the board to consider leading up to a July 13th school board meeting. What we'll be sharing tonight will really be 5 highlights. We want to share the community context for you about what the work we've been doing, some work around funding pressures and identifying what those pressures are again, the decision-making process that we've gone through over the last few months, especially arriving at this recommendation. You'll hear the recommendation itself and then a timeline as to how we intend to move this forward. For a long time in Owatonna, we've known that strong schools equals strong communities. In fact, at a survey that was done in the fall of 2018, it was determined that 94% of the people that were polled identified that the job performance of our teachers and instructional staff is excellent or good. Furthermore, 93% rated the quality of the education that the Owatonna Public Schools provides as excellent or good. And lastly, 91% of the community agreed that they received a good value from the investment that they made in their schools. I've lived in Owatonna for 20 years, and I know that in the past 20 years, my kids personally have received a top-notch education. And so we know that the strong schools that we have also equal that strong community now and moving forward. Within that as well, our community has been incredibly supportive. So an operating levy was approved in 2013, and that was a 7-year operating levy to support our school staff and programs. Furthermore, We asked the community to find solutions that hadn't been addressed in a long time for our facilities. And so in 2015, we asked the community for 78 million to help us with our elementary and middle schools. And then finally, last fall in November, we asked the community to consider addressing the greatest facility need that we had, which was our high school, and that was successfully passed in November of 2019. Within that new high school ask, though, not only was our community continued to be invested within this, but our business community found a way to donate more than $20 million toward that cause to lower that tax impact for the property owners, recognizing that facilities play a critical part in the success of our school district. We also keep our promises. In 2013, we passed a 7-year operating levy that was set to expire at the end of this year or at the beginning of 2021 to help us fund our programs and services. We've kept that promise. Within the last 7 years, we've had balanced budgets every year, and we've maintained a reasonable fund balance for cash flow and unanticipated expenses, which helps us, again, to be aware that there may be emergencies that we need to take part in, that we need to have that cash flow available, and again, any unforeseen expenses. We also told our taxpayers when we went out for our bond in 2019 that we expected to arrive at a lower than expected bond rate, and we did just that. We went from an expected rate of about 4% to arriving at just over 2.4%, which again has an immediate impact in tax savings for our taxpayers. The last part of that is really a message around what we need to remember around school district funding. Bonds are for building and levies are for learning. We are so appreciative that the community helped us with those facility bonds to help us really shore up our facility needs. But it still leaves that levy part, which is for the operations and the learning that happens within a school district, question marks that we need to continue to pursue. So again, these funds are legally separated and cannot mingle. So I've had a few people in the community approach me and say, we just passed this bond referendum and now it appears that you're kind of looking for more. And the answer to that is yes, and thank you for passing that bond referendum, but those accounts and those money sources are legally separated and cannot be commingled. So again, bonds can't be spent on learning programs for us. They can't be spent on staffing. They're really meant to support classroom learning and related expenses. Lastly, I wanted to share on March 15th, we were asked by Governor Walz to support our community through the COVID-19 response. We created distance learning plans in Owatonna in 3 days, and many other districts actually had the luxury of having 8 days, and we did it in 3 days. When asked, our community of parents responded with saying that the teacher responded to questions in a reasonable time at 98%. The teacher was easy to reach with questions at 97%. The child being able to access materials and assignments through internet or paper copies, 94%. And lastly, the amount of work that was assigned each day was just right. 81% of our elementary parents agreed with that. I think those are phenomenal statistics that said in 3 days, with many iterations along the way, we built a system to support the learning of our students during pandemic time. Within that time, we were also asked to provide free meals. Through March 15th up until June 4th, we provided over 100,000 meals to our students ages 0 to 18. No questions asked. We also provided childcare for our essential workers that needed to work in emergency settings or other essential places of work. This summer, and I will get into that in our administrative report later, we are busily planning for the scenarios that may set themselves up for 2020. The other bad news was we went from a state budget surplus because of the pandemic to quickly becoming a state budget deficit. Recognizing that for the foreseeable future, it does not appear that there will be any additional revenue for school districts, and furthermore, there may be additional reductions. So our community is experiencing economic uncertainty, and we realize that as we have prepared these recommendations.
Yeah, as Jeff mentioned, obviously, we know we have that state budget deficit, but for over the years, we continue to see funding pressures increasing from the state and federal levels for school districts. So as you can see from this graph here, the state funding has not kept pace with inflation since 2003. And so essentially that blue dotted line at the top of this graph should be where we're at if the state funding had kept pace with inflation. So we should be at 7,150 per student, but today we're only at $6,567 per student, which creates that funding gap of about $583 per student, which equates to about $3 million each year that we're not receiving because that inflation hasn't kept pace for that state funding. And obviously, we all know that it takes all these resources to provide our students with education they deserve once they're in a classroom, and we serve all students. And there are required academic and support programs that cost the district nearly $7 million more than it receives each year from the state and federal governments. So obviously, that state funding gap is compounded with these required academic and support programs that aren't fully funded by the state and federal government. So if our operating levy is not renewed in November of 2020, we will essentially lose $2.5 million per year, which would require cuts to programs and services. And these costs would be on top of cuts that we've already made to maintain those balanced budgets that we spoke of earlier, with the $500,000 we cut in 1920, and we also cut $2 million for the 2021 school year. As you can see here, this is where we fall with our voter approved levy. You can see Owatonna falls in the bottom third of the Big Nine. We're behind Northfield and Faribault. As you can see, Austin looks like it's an outlier, obviously a very low voter approved operating levy. However, their board just approved to go out this fall for a vote as well for an increase of $505 per student. So you can see that that would put them right in line with the other school districts in the Big Nine. So they, if they were to pass, they wouldn't be that outlier any longer here. So that means that all schools are experiencing these same funding pressures and trying to come up with other solutions to get additional funding so that we can maintain those quality programs that we have. And as you can see here, this is a graph that just basically shows where our unassigned fund balance target is as a board. So our board unassigned fund balance target is 8 to 10%. It's where that gray area falls. So as you can see, a levy is very cyclical in nature. So when you take a look at 2013, when we passed our levy, we had dipped just below that unassigned fund balance target. And so with the additional revenue that the community supported us for, we were able to bring that fund balance up a little and arch that down. And now we see that cyclical nature coming down again at the end of this levy. And with these funding pressures that continue and these gaps that continue to be created at the state and federal levels, we have to again decide how to bring in additional revenue sources to support our fund balance moving forward. And as we all know, we do our best to stretch every dollar and try to be efficient as possible and maintain that quality education for all of our students. But without any additional revenue, we are forced to continue to make cuts, which impacts obviously class sizes and programming and staffing levels.
So throughout these and recognizing the funding pressures that we're under as a district, and as Amanda shared, other districts are as well, there are really only 3 options for us to consider. The first of which is a straight cut in expenses, which we believe we've already started to do. But if we were cutting more additional expenses, we end up in a situation where we're starting to really impact class sizes. We're also starting to impact programs that people have come to find as part of the quality that we provide. The second option would be to increase revenue through an operating levy, which means that if we were to look at this, we made, as we did on May 20th, we laid out for the board an option to immediately increase our student per pupil unit funding by $600 per pupil unit, which equated to just about $21 a month, or between $20 and $21 a month for a home valued at $175,000. The other option would be if we could do some of both. So continuing to tighten our belt and making sure that we're cutting expenses, but also asking the community for small increases over time that might be shared to spread that out. So again, education funding, just as a reminder, is a shared partnership between state, federal government, and local communities. And as Amanda iterated so well, there is this gap between what the state and federal government has promised us a long time ago, but yet they haven't kept up with that funding, which puts pressure on our local community. By law, one reminder is that our local voters have the opportunity to provide additional funding for their schools. Whether you build buildings or pay for classroom materials, the school district has to go out and ask the community for that approval. Unlike our other civic partners, both the city and the county are not required to that action. So as we review these options, and these should look somewhat familiar because we did lay these out for you at our meeting on May 20th as well. Option 1, which would really to be just to renew our existing levy with no increase, plus we make $6.5 million in cuts, would allow us over the next 3 years, or we'd have to make those $6.5 million over the next 3 years, but we would also need to return to the taxpayers in November of 21 to ask the question again, because with only a renewal of that existing levy, our finances will continue to be in question as we can move forward. Option 2 was a shared approach, which really allowed us to say, we recognize the economic impact of COVID-19, which would allow us to say there is no tax increase for the 2021 year. And then what we would be asking is a phased-in approach. So in 2022, we would ask for a $10 per month tax increase. And again, all of these values are based on a $175,000 home. That would be for 3 years. And then in 2025, we would ask for an additional $10 a month, which basically leads us to financial stability with the addition of $5.25 million in cuts, allows us that financial stability out through the 2031 school year. Option 3 was a $20 a month tax increase. And again, this was the $600 per pupil unit increase with additional cuts of $4.5 million over the next 3 years. So then we looked at sharing the burden, which means that belt tightening through the budget cuts on the district side and a request for a small increase for our operating levy on the community side would allow us to have that shared approach, which we believe is responsible not only to the district and the parents and the students it supports, but also a responsible ask of our community. So I bring to you the official recommendation that we offer 2 questions on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot, which would be question 1 would be simply to renew the existing levy, which we know is direly needed. Question 2 would increase the levy in 2022 and in 2025 as a phased-in approach, which we believe, again, helps to share and spread out that tax impact really over the next 10 years. So you'll see how this is laid out again. This is just based, oh, I'm sorry, Amanda, this is your slide. Go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. So as you can see, this is how the ballot would essentially lay out. So question 1 would be obviously the renewal of the existing levy that was previously approved by our voters in 2013. There would be a minimal increase per month with this our annual inflation factor, which was already approved by the voters in 2013. So there'd be no new revenue with question 1. Question 2 would be the phased-in operating levy, which would essentially have a 0 tax increase in 2021. And then we would see a $10 per month tax increase in 2022. And then again in 2025, as we step up those $300 per pupil unit increase. So you would see that we'd have an additional $1.6 million in annual revenue from 2022 to 2024. And then we'd see an additional $1.6 million from 2025 to 2031. And question 2 would be contingent on question 1 passing. So question 1 would have to pass in order for question 2 to. So the benefits of having this shared approach really is we're spreading out the tax increase over time with the phase-in levy. So instead of asking for everything up front, we're asking for those incremental increases, which helps with the tax impact over the time of that levy. So we really are essentially asking for no increase in 2021. The first tax increase would come in calendar year 2022, and then the second in 2025. So spacing that out throughout the levy period. And obviously, as Jeff mentioned earlier, this partners with the community and it helps to provide financial stability for the next 10 years for the school district. And it essentially combines those budget cuts on our side with the tax support on the community side and really offers that fiscally conservative and respectful approach, really essentially only asking for what's needed when it's needed throughout the levy period. And just as a reminder, ag land is not taxed on an operating levy question. It's only the house, the garage, and 1 acre. So what if both questions pass? Obviously, as Jeff and I have both mentioned, this creates that financial stability for us for the next 10 years through the 2030-2031 school year. And it also allows us to maintain those quality programs and activities, class sizes that are really important to families and to our school district, and our career technical education programs. And then what if both questions fail? So essentially, if both questions fail, we will be having to make 6.5 million in cuts right away through the 2022-2023 school year, and more if no additional funding is created within that time frame. We will see class sizes increase through teacher layoffs, and we will have cuts to school and district support services, which would include, administrative, custodial, clerical, healthcare. That's just a start. Those are just some examples. And we would also see some cuts to academic activities, athletics, and music programs.
So in closing, the 4 real themes we wanted to lay out for you again is that our community recognizing that strong schools really help build Owatonna and continue to be a strong community. Secondly, you have voted before and the district has kept our promises around how we've spent the money that you have so graciously given us. In 2013, remember, there was a successful passage of a 7-year operating levy. We're coming to the end of that, but during that 7 years, we've successfully balanced our budgets. The funding pressures that Amanda laid out are certainly there. While we do our best to stretch every dollar, it's becoming increasingly difficult as we're continuing to have to make up the gap or ask for money from our taxpayers to make up the gap to maintain that quality for our students. And then lastly, we feel that our recommendation is truly a shared partnership that helps us not only with the state and federal funding that we do get, but also the local community helping us to identify what that quality is and how we need to maintain it. So in regards to a decision timeline, during February and March of this year, we gave financial outlook presentations to our staff. In March through May, we spent the crux of our time, about 120% of our time to be exact, on our COVID-19 response, really to provide those services and continued quality for our families and students. On May 7th, the Finance Committee reviewed the options for this funding. On May 20th, as I've prefaced before, the board did hear about these options in a school board work session. Tonight, we are asking you to at least give thought to those recommendations, leading then to a July 13th board vote on the referendum recommendation, which aligns with state laws around balloting for the November 2020 election. We are starting school August 31st for our high school students, September 2nd for our middle school students, and then September 2nd then for elementary students. Keep that in our focus. On September 18th, early voting would begin, and then again on November 3rd would be election day. And that is just a spot where you can find more information about our finance facts for the district. And at this time, I would open it up to questions from our board members.
Board members, any questions for Mr. Elstad? Short of that, what I'd like to do is just go around the horn one last time and get a sense of your comfort level with regard to that July 13 vote. And Eric, you're just to my right. I'll ask you to weigh in.
I'm all for what we had worked on the work session for this compromise in the middle, number choice 2, and the one that we were talking about presenting to the public, the making the cuts, 0 increase for the first year, and then the $10 a month for an average $170,000 house for the first 3 years, and then that additional $10 increase for the additional on the 2025 tax season.
Thank you. And I'm just going to kind of go around the horn as I see you on my screen. Jolene, your feelings?
I think it's the most responsible choice, and I think it's the best choice for where we're at right now, given COVID and our economy, and just really sharing some of the burdens of how schools are funded. And I like the ability to say to the community, if both of these pass, we're done for 10 years. We're not coming back. Our buildings are in great shape. Our budget's in great shape. We're just going to take a break for the next decade.
Jolene, thanks. How about you, Tim?
Yeah, having been part of the finance committee discussion and our work session, I agree that we're talking about the best route for us.
Thanks, Tim. How about you, Christina?
I agree that this is our best choice at this point in time, and the extra year of 0% increase will be helpful as everyone kind of recuperates from what's been kind of a crazy year this year.
Christina, thanks. Lori?
Yeah, I would just echo everyone's sentiments. I think the only other comment I would make is I hope and pray that our constituents will recognize the net result based on that savings that we were able to achieve on the bond. Again, it was really just an opportune situation, you know, that resulted in a real substantial savings to our taxpayers, and hopefully that will help them see the value of the school levy and the importance of supporting it again. So yeah, I would agree that a 2-question ballot and the approach that we're proposing is the most responsible.
I'm going to echo Lori's sentiments. Responsible, I think, is the right word to be using. The other thought in all of this is we're weighing out the difference between wants and needs. And I think that this really boiled it down to strictly needs. And just like we did 7 years ago, we're presenting to the community just only what we absolutely positively need with regard to maintaining the school district. I'm going to bounce things back to Mr. Elstad one last time, because there is not a vote necessary tonight, but when we come back on July 13th, can you talk a little bit more about what we're approving that night? We're approving essentially the ballot itself. Is that right?
That is correct. What you'll be officially approving is the ballot language itself. That will be present then on the November 3rd election. I did want to make a comment, if I may, based upon Lori Weisenberger's comment around bond savings. When people look at their tax statements for 2020, I think they realized and saw the bond referendum come onto their statement. And I think one of the things that I need to make sure that the public understands is that when those statements came out, we still were assuming a 4% bond rate because that was what we anticipated. We had to anticipate that. In Truth and Taxation, we had to let the public know that's what it potentially could be. What the public will see in their 2021 statement, though, is a reduction to their bond referendum portion, because we have now realized what those bond savings were in interest rate, which people will see. So I'll give you one for instance. And again, these are sort of ballpark figures, but fairly close. So within the bond that we passed, I believe we were asking our taxpayers at that $175,000 valued home again. I think it was for about $14 or $15 a month. And with the savings of the bond referendums, the bond interest rate that we achieved, we believe that the net result, and again, if we look at that shared partnership where you saw a $10 per month sort of increase, we believe the net result because of those savings will actually be more like a $5 increase than a $10, because we'll have saved $5 a month on our bond rate, which would drop it down to about $10 a month versus what was projected at about $15 a month. So again, there are some intricacies here. I think, I would agree that after research and looking at where we're at, it is a responsible and respectful way of presenting this to the community. It would be highly irresponsible for me as the superintendent to present to you something that puts us in a financial spot where we're going to continue to have to dig out for the next 4, 5, 6 years. The responsible thing to do is to present this to the community for their consideration, in addition to presenting the ballot for the board's consideration, so that the community has some options available to it. So with that, I would just add that you'll be again voting on the ballot language on July 13th. And so the recommendation will be to add this to the ballot, which you'll then again consider that evening.
Board members, any last thoughts or questions before we move on? Okay, hearing none. One last thing, Amanda, kudos to you because, you know, where we are landing tonight relative to where our conversations were back in February and March. And ultimately, your recommendation of bringing this in, you and Mr. Elstad, bringing this in a 2-vote format as well as the stair-stepped approach rather than asking people for a big tax increase right off the bat, and the mere fact that these cuts that you'll be making are phased in over time as well really does make a heck of a lot of sense. And I think that hopefully the community will see the merit in that as well. We will continue to move on with item 7, which would be general information. Tonight, you had some information in your packet relative to some TIF financing from the city of Owatonna. Does anybody have any questions relative to that project that you had in your report? Okay, hearing none, we will move on and we'll do board forum. How about if we go in the reverse order? Lori, you have anything for board forum tonight?
I do not. Thank you.
Christina, do you have anything?
Nope, I don't have anything today.
How about you, Tim?
Nothing from me today.
Jolene?
The facilities committee met prior to this meeting and continuing on the path of gathering more information for the building and meeting with some community members to make sure everyone's on the same page as this kind of moves along in the process.
Eric, anything to add?
Nope, Jolene covered that for facilities meeting we had earlier, and I have nothing else to add.
Daniela, you were able to make it and join us for our board meeting tonight. Here's an opportunity for you to step forward. Anything that you'd like to add for board forum tonight?
Yes, hi everyone. It's nice to see you all again. I don't really have anything to say, but I'm just excited to get to work and learn from all of the meetings.
We're glad you're here. Glad you were able to join us. I don't have anything to add for board forum tonight either. I'll turn things over to Mr. Elstad for anything you might have to add for the administrative report.
Thank you. I don't have a lot this evening. I'll abbreviate those reports. When I talk about my administrative report, though, it's really prefacing all of the work that our district administrators, and I do want to publicly thank our district administrators and all of our staff really for the tireless work that we have put into our COVID-19 response. It hasn't ended. As soon as the school year ended, there was really no time for even taking a deep breath because now we're really in the throes of planning for the fall of 2020. And so last week, the Minnesota Department of Education released 3 options that the district will need to prepare for. Those 3 options being distance learning, which we did for the last 3 months, where none of our students will attend in-person classes. A second option, which is a hybrid, which would allow us to have approximately 50% of our students present in classrooms, but the other 50% would have to be learning from a distant location. And then the last one is where all of our students are present, but thrown in there is the recommendations from the Department of Health and CDC around all of the distancing and cleanliness and sanitizing processes that we have to engage in. So within that, our district team put together a group of about 40 individuals from pretty much every walk of life in our district, including teachers, custodians, secretaries, health services staff, paraprofessionals, educational assistants, and so on. And within the work that we have been doing, we've spent 2 almost full afternoons together, really sort of devising and asking questions and really thinking about what are the things we need to be thinking about within our return to school in the fall. Now recognizing that the department has given us those 3 recommendations to prepare for, our next work is to really solidify our logistics plan for all 3 of those options. Now, a couple of things we became aware of a number of things last Thursday in our conference call with the Commissioner of Education. But within that, 2 things that really caught my attention. One of which is that it appears that the Minnesota Department of Education is changing their viewpoint about how we address COVID-19 in a regional way, which means that there could very well be a time during the 2021 school year where we have all of our students in Owatonna in person, and a community just to the west or east, north, south of us within 15 minutes or even 5 minutes could be distance learning because they have an outbreak in their particular school. It could even be broken down by community within the school. So we could very well have an elementary that is infected that we can no longer have in-person classes. So we have to adjust their learning to distance learning. And then vice versa, we could have a high school that needs to be in person and another school, two or three other schools may be doing distance learning. So we have a little more flexibility when it comes to how we're going to approach that. And we believe that the guidance will allow us to address that in a regional way. The other thing that we heard very clearly from the commissioner is that in all likelihood, our students in Owatonna may see all three approaches during one school year. So to lay this out in an example, we may very well start the year with all of our students in session. And I think all of us are crossing our fingers for that because we believe we serve our best students best when we have them in person. But if we have an outbreak in Owatonna, we may have to take a 3-week break, perhaps, I'm guessing at the time frame, but a 3-week break in instruction where we're doing distance learning for those 3 weeks. And then we return our students back to either a hybrid or we return our students back to full. What we know for certain is that COVID-19 does not make appointments with any of us, and that we need to be clear that within the year, we may have to adjust and be very agile as to how we approach school from those three venues. And so your team at the Owatonna Public Schools is working very hard to make sure that we put the best possible options in front of our students and that we have the best plan. We're going to arrive at some decisions probably at the end of this month, which then what we're going to do is take that feedback around how we choose to address all three of those options to a parent feedback group and a student feedback group, so we can continue to kind of fine tune. The timeline for us is that all of these scenarios that we're preparing for, on July 27th, we've been told by the department that they will deliver some kind of final guidance for us, which may be regional in its approach. But during that guidance, it will give us and help us really fine tune how we will be starting our school year in Owatonna. So that's a fairly short report. There's a lot of work in that condensed report. But what I'm very proud of is the just real team effort that has gone into how we're doing this. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces within each of these, and the team has been diligently thinking through all of that. So I would entertain any questions that board members have around that topic.
I have a question, maybe two. Jeff, could you comment, did the state offer any guidance as it relates to testing in our buildings? Or whether that's that remains offsite or maybe in our healthcare facilities? And then secondly, any direction about masks and whether those, any details on that, or is it too early?
I'll address the second question first when it comes to masks. I don't know that we've received any exact guidance on masks. There are a couple of things in play with that. One of them is developmental in nature, in that for some age level groupings, masks may not be appropriate because we learned quickly with some of our younger kids that masks get touched a lot and moved around, and jokingly they become a hat in about 30 seconds for some of our students, and so that may not be appropriate. The latest guidance we have is that for those that it's appropriate, so adults and maybe some of our older students, they may be recommended but not mandated, is what we've heard thus far. In relation to your first question, and would you just rephrase that for me again, Lori, so I don't miss it?
Yeah, I was just curious whether the state has offered any guidance to school districts. In other words, are they expecting that schools will be testing, help for COVID or antibodies or whatever within the school structure, or are they leaving that with healthcare professionals?
Thank you. And thank you for clarifying testing, because whenever you say testing, I often go to MCA testing and other standardized testing. So thank you. COVID-19 testing. We haven't received any guidance on that as well. Thus far, the Department of Health has really allowed our local Mayo Clinic testing site to be the local site that people would go to. We don't feel right now that we would have the ability to do a test in our building simply because we don't have the healthcare professionals to do so. But again, things can change. We've learned that over the last 3 months that things can change on a dime, but thus far, that's really been reserved for the medical community. And so we believe that would be kind of continued, that any students that believe they may have been in kind of contact would utilize the Mayo Clinic testing service.
Board members, any other questions? Can you take 1 second and clarify the timeline? It's the end of July, right?
Right. So the week of July 27th is when we're to get final guidance from the Department of Education. And that really will give us what we believe is kind of our quote unquote orders, if you will, about how we need to plan for the school year. There's been some consternation around that because some of our local legislators believe that that is coming too late and that that guidance should have come earlier. What we're learning though is that actually the later you go, the probably more exact you can be because you just don't understand the nature of how the pandemic may increase or decrease. But again, July 27th. And so our plan is this. Once we have that final release, we are actually going to take a little time, maybe a week or two, just to really fine tune before we communicate with families and community around it, because we want to make sure we get it right. If we're able to return in person, that means something totally different than if we have to go to a hybrid model, which requires a little bit more finesse because it's going to require a real partnership from our families again. So again, we're anticipating that response on July 27th, but we're going to remain nimble over the next year for sure.
With that, we are going to move on to item 9 on our agenda tonight, which is the consent agenda. Again, the reminder is we are approving the minutes from May 20th and June 8th, the disbursement and the personnel reports. Does anybody have a reason to believe that we need to pull any item out and vote on it separately? Hearing none, I will move that the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Eric, I'll turn it over to you for the roll call vote.
Jolene,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself's an aye, 6-0.
That motion carried. Thank you very much. We're going to move on then to item 10. We have several items tonight with regard to requiring board action. The first one, item A, would be the 2020-2021 preliminary budget. All of this has been very adequately presented to us in our previous work session. Any last questions for Amanda or Jeff as it relates to that? Okay, hearing none, and just in the ease of simplicity tonight, I will once again introduce each of these motions with regard to this preliminary budget. I move that the board approve the 2020-2021 preliminary budget as presented.
Second.
Tim has the second. Eric, I'm going to turn things over to you for the roll call vote.
Jolene,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself's an aye, so 6-0 vote for pass.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item B tonight would be the casual worker pay schedule. A little bit of introduction with this one. I'll turn it over to Mr. Elstad.
Thank you. This is something that we approve on an annual basis, which allows us to pay our workers for things like ticket taking and all sorts of things. There's a number of a litany of things that we use casual worker pay for. And so the proposal, because of our reductions, was to keep the casual worker pay the same as it was for the 2019-2020 school year. And again, keeping that the same for this 2020-2021 school year.
Any questions from the board on this? Okay,
Um,
again,
Mark, maybe just a quick comment. So I, I did review that schedule and I will, just comment again, recognizing our shared approach in terms of our financial situation with the public, recognizing the appropriate thing is to stay static and constant on those. There are a few that I'd like to see changed and enhanced, but we can only do what we can do. So maybe more of a want than a need.
thanks, Lori. Any other comments? And hearing none, I will then move that the board approve the 2020-2021 casual worker pay schedule as presented.
Second.
Jolene has the second. Eric, would you do the roll call?
Certainly. Jolene,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself an aye. 6-0 pass.
Motion carries. Item C tonight, no pun intended, is the C membership. This is something that we approve every year at this time. Once again, Mr. Elstad with a little bit of clarifying comments.
Yeah, the C is an acronym for Schools for Equity in Education. This is a group that helps to advocate at the state capitol on our behalf as a district, always seeking equity. And again, I think their basis is the zip code of where kids live in Minnesota should not base their funding. And so they're always seeking ways in a district like ours, which somehow it's more difficult for us to achieve funding because we don't have the tax base that some of the other school districts have. And so again, this group advocates on our behalf toward that effort. We've seen some motion a few sessions ago, and they continue to advocate and hopefully will help to turn that funding stream around at some point.
Board members, any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, I will then move that the board approve the membership for the 2020-2021 school year to Schools for Education, Equity in Education.
Second.
Eric has the second. Eric, would you take care of the roll call?
Certainly. Jolene,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself an aye. 6-0 pass.
That motion carries. Item D, which is the 2020-2021 school board meeting schedule. Sarah did a very nice job of outlining any of the school-related activities that could possibly be a conflict with the schedule as presented. Anybody have any questions or thoughts on the proposed school meeting schedule? Again, hearing none, I will move that the board approve the 2020-2021 school board meeting schedule as presented.
Second.
Tim has the second. Eric, would you do the roll call?
Jolene,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself an aye. 6-0 pass.
Thank you. Item E tonight would be the Minnesota School Board Association membership. Same thing. We always approve it at this time of the year. I think all of us would wholeheartedly agree that the training that we have benefited from and the ongoing support and guidance that we get from the School Board Association is well worth our time and energy. I'm certainly going to encourage all of us to ratify this. Anybody have any questions or comments regarding MSBA? Hearing none. I will move that the board approve membership to the Minnesota School Boards Association for the 2020-2021 school year.
Second.
It has been seconded. Who was that seconded it?
Lori.
Oh, thanks, Lori. Eric.
Jolene,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself an aye. 6-0 pass.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item F tonight, Minnesota State High School League membership. I will ask Mr. Elstad for just a quick reminder of the nature of that.
Yeah, again, this is an agreement that ends on June 30th of every year. It just recertifies us to be a member of the Minnesota State High School League. There's also some district dues that we pay as a result. of that. But again, it allows us the membership and for our students to be able to participate in all of the extracurricular activities.
Anybody have any questions? Hearing none, I will move that the board approve the 2020-2021 resolution for membership in the Minnesota State High School League.
Second.
Eric has the second. Eric, would you take care of the vote?
Jolene,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
I,
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself as an I. 6-0 pass.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Item G tonight would be the resolution approving the continued use of software. We have a rather unique circumstance here with our district, and I'll ask Mr. Elstad for the explanation.
Thank you. It was about a little over a year ago when we hired Danielle Tice to be our Director of Special Services. And coming to us, Danielle brings a number of different skills and gifts. And one of those is particularly her understanding of how we help our students with emotional behavioral disabilities. And so through her ingenious efforts, before she became a member and employee of our school district, she had developed a consulting group that had developed a product that is used to help to monitor the behaviors of our students, which then again help to build a culture. I think throughout the course of this year, you've actually heard some of the fruits of that labor, which is our staff reporting on some of our students with the most severe of emotional behavioral disabilities, participating in regular classrooms and really making strides toward improvement, or at least being able to monitor their own behavior and find ways to satisfy that behavior that they may be having. And so again, part of what you're being asked to resolve tonight is our agreement that there's a small stipend that Tice Consulting does get for this program and the purchase. However, what I would share with you again is that this is actually drastically reduced of what she would charge a typical district our size. And part of it is that Danielle is able to do some of those sorts of trainings and things for our staff without having to charge for those costs. So again, I would ask that the board consider this resolution for us to continue the use of the performance tracking system.
Board members, any questions on this topic? Okay, hearing none. I will move that the board approve the resolution approving continued use of the software and the payment of the fee.
Second.
Jolene has the second. Eric, would you take care of roll call?
Jolene,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
I,
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself as an I. 6-0 pass.
And motion carries. Item H tonight is the resolution establishing dates for filing affidavits of candidacy. Thanks to Sarah Hoffman, who's in the room with us tonight, for doing the heavy lifting and making sure that we as a district remain compliant and have all of the paperwork ready to go for candidates interested in filing for school board candidacy. Anything you need to add, want to add with regard to this?
No, I know you have the dates there and I really don't have anything to add. And I was going to turn it over to Sarah if there were any questions you have, because she really is the person that helps to help those candidates file those affidavits.
Does not appear that we have any questions from the board. So with that, I will move that the board approve the resolution establishing dates for filing affidavits of candidacy.
Second.
Jolene has the second. Eric will take care of the roll call.
Jolene,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
I,
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself as an I. 6-0 pass.
Motion carries. Last item tonight would be gifts to the district. One last time, I will turn things over to Mr. Elstad.
Thank you. We have two gifts to report this evening. And one of the gifts is unique because it actually comes from House Motors, which is a relatively new dealership to our community. But, oh, pardon me. I think I must have had, I got to make sure I got the right month here. I'm sorry. Let me backtrack here. I got off track. Pardon the technology is great when you use it well. Sometimes when you don't use it as well as you should, you end up causing yourself an issue. But again, here we are. Sorry about that. So the two gifts that we're recognizing tonight, one of them again is from the House Auto Group. And this actually is a form of equipment. And so as part of our bringing back our automotive program at the high school, they donated an AMCO brake lathe for our group or for our students, as well as a pneumatic bumper jack that our students will be able to use as we start to kind of explore and bring back some of those automotive technologies. And secondly, there's a gift from the Buck family for our Clay Target team in the amount of $70. So those are our two gifts to recognize this evening.
Any questions from the board? Hearing none, I will move that the board approve the resolution for acceptance of gifts as presented.
Second.
Jolene has the second. Eric will do the roll call.
Joanne,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself tonight. 6-0 pass.
That motion carried. That takes care of our meeting tonight, folks. I want to thank all of you for your participation. I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
Jolene has a second. Eric, last time.
Joanne,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I myself and I. 6-0 pass to end the session.
That motion carried. And folks, thank you very much. And we will see you again on July 13th. Good night.
Good night.